have next a fireside chat, Seed to Scale, the art of early stage fundraising. And this session will be guided by Mr. Jofin, partner at Pienza, and Mr. Anshu, partner at Whiteboard Capital. Let's welcome them with a big round of applause. So please.
Hey Anshu. So good afternoon, everyone. So thanks for joining us right after lunch, and sorry about being late as well. So it's great to connect, and it's great to see such an amazing event at Huddle. So probably we'll just get started with a very quick intro about ourselves. I'm Jofin. I'm currently partner at Pienza Ventures. We are a Seattle-based fund, very specifically focused on Indian companies building B2B software, selling to the US market. And before this, I've been a founder. So I've been a founder for like 14 years, and then in the VC space for only a few months. So I'm more of a founder than a VC or an investor. So built a couple of companies, seen the good and bad part of starting up, and then recently started with Pienza Ventures. So, Anshu.
Thanks, Jofin. So I'm actually the reverse in terms of background. I've never been a founder, except for founding Whiteboard Capital, which is the firm that I run, but not an entrepreneur in the conventional sense. Been a banker, been in the venture ecosystem now for the last 15 odd years. At Whiteboard, we started in 2018, and Whiteboard Capital was founded with a fairly simple idea around funding businesses at the whiteboard stage. We are reasonably large investors in consumer, financial services, and B2B businesses largely around wholesale marketplaces. So we were lucky to be first investors in a company called Cred. We were first investors in a men's innerwear brand called Dimension. First investors in a company called Dhan, which is in the broking space. First investors in a company called Deserve, which is in the wealth management space. First investors in Nat Habit, Apna Club, Zeno Health, and a few others. So we've had a few lucky breaks on the way, but I think that's enough for the intro. Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that we can actually take a founder side of it and the investor side of it here, right? So, but I was talking to Fasil about this whole session, and we had a bunch of these investor sessions as I was looking through the agenda. We had a lot of very focused sessions on on valuations, on creating your pitch, etc. And this is very generic, right? So, and the suggestion that I got was keep it generic, keep it open, keep it like casual, right? So the first thing that I wanted to really bring up is funding as such, right? So everyone who's starting up wants to raise funds, wants to get to the VCs, wants to pitch to the VCs. So the real big question is, when should you raise, right? Or when should you decide to raise even, right? So, and what is that kind of startup that needs a fundraising? So as a founder, what is the criteria to decide that, hey, I want to raise funds and grow this in a hyperscale mode? So what's your thoughts on that, Anshu?
Interesting. So I think first, right, if you look at entrepreneurship itself, it's probably the second most illogical decision you'll make after marriage. So it's pretty hard to be logical about these decisions. So I think for a founder in general, I think the things that matter or should matter are first and foremost, ever since venture capital's become big, we've actually made a big deal about a lot of entrepreneurs who've raised significant amount of money. And for some weird reason, that's become an important success metric, that fundraising equals success. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, some of that myth has been shattered. Uh, I think next 5 years it'll get shattered even more. I think fundamentally what founders should do is trying to bring some sanity into that process, wherein when you're building something out, you first need to know what does success mean. Now there are founders I've met in my life for whom success has meant building a $100 million revenue company. I've met founders for whom success has meant having 500 enterprise customers. So I think depending on what your success metric is, you should first and foremost try to figure out if there is a way to build your business on your own terms. There is no substitute to that. So if a founder can run her journey without having to worry about people like us creating trouble on the way, it's always the more preferable path. It may not be the more glamorous path, but it always is the more stable path. It lets you at least have a life. Now, if what you intend to achieve somehow cannot be achieved with the resources you have at your disposal, but at the same time the vision's large enough where you think getting in a partner makes sense, and as you use the word, right, hyperscale. So I think venture capital automatically attaches itself to a business where there is a need to scale at a disproportionate level, and that scale brings in its own set of challenges. There is capital to help with some of the challenges, but some challenges will never go away. So I think first and foremost, it's a mindset-driven decision where a founder first needs to feel comfortable in the fact that this business, as per my vision, can only be built in partnership with people who probably, somebody brings in capital, somebody brings in expertise, somebody brings in some kind of social validation. So there are various pieces that are relevant. Now, if capital does happen to be an important variable for you to achieve your vision, is when you should raise. But I would again repeat, of 100 businesses that are set up on a daily basis, probably only 5 of them should raise external capital. Not the numbers that people follow, but in general, 95 businesses would do much better without external capital. So taking that decision for a founder is, in my mind, a hard one, but a very important one.
Right. So that's an interesting point for me as well, right? So the last 8 months over close to around 330 plus pitches that I've heard, right? So gradually over that process, I developed this vibe check around, does the founder really need it, right? So and if you really think about it, it's actually a one single question, and that you have to ask yourself, and understand if you have a clear, conscious answer to that, which is, do you want to build $1 billion company, right? And every VC, when you're going to a VC, every VC is expecting every single company of theirs to be $1 billion company. And $1 billion company, it's fundamentally 8,000 crores, a company that is worth 8,000 crores. And do you imagine yourself running that company or getting to that milestone in a 5 to 10 year period, and a company that is worth 8,000 crores, right? So in most of the cases, and in my case, I can very well say in most of the cases, probably aligning with that 95% that you said, right? So most of the founders haven't thought about it. And their idea of success is not running an 8,000 crore company in many cases, right? And when that misalignment happens, when the VC wants an 8,000 crore company and you cannot even imagine in your head or dream in your head about running an 8,000 crore company, that's like, from day one, there is a misalignment in expectations between the partners, right? So, yeah.
I think which is why I actually mentioned, right, that for some reasons, and reasons which are all created by us, right, a company that has raised, I don't know, $200 million or $500 million, the company is still not profitable. If you went back to mid-90s, those wouldn't be the companies that would be the most revered. People would talk about businesses that actually made money as the ones being more successful. But I think the world has moved to a level where those companies are seen as the more successful ones, and now it's so deeply seeped in. For example, I meet a lot of students at the IITs, at the IIMs, where they think they have a very good idea, and in most cases it may be a very good idea. They also feel that because I have a very good idea, I should be able to raise money against that idea. Whether or not I need that money, or whether or not the business necessarily benefits from that money in the long term. In the short term, nobody minds if there's money coming in, because a lot of people among peer groups, among ex-founders, among people. So if you are in that world where either you're working in a tech startup where everybody around you is thinking of starting up and creating a startup of their own, or you're coming from an engineering college or a business school where you've seen some peers being able to like find success with that, all of a sudden it becomes fairly natural for you to expect that fundraising is something I need to do. And I feel a large part of the fault lies also at the end of people like us, who in the endeavor to have a wide pipeline of companies to evaluate, sell stories to founders, or go to campuses and give sessions on how to raise capital without necessarily delving into whether you need to raise capital or not, because it's kind of serving our own selfish interest. So I think it's we're living in a warped world, so it'll take some time to correct. But fundamentally, I think if a founder is reasonably clear about their long-term journey, this answer automatically becomes easier.
Got it. And that also calls for funding being equated to VC funding and large-scale funding. It need not be the case, right? So you need capital for your business, and that's pretty much it, right? So, and in any business school, you learn about capital, and capital can come in multiple ways, right? So from debt to angel funding to customer funding to partnership-driven funding to a lot of different grants and a lot of different other things. And obviously there are other creative ways in which you can raise funding as well. So there are these famous stories of Airbnb founders selling cereal boxes to raise the initial $20,000 or $30,000 to get started with their company, right? So as founders, there are a lot of n number of creative ways in which you can raise funding, right? In our personal journey, in our first company, we actually got into this program called Startup Chile, and the only objective for us was they gave us a grant of around $20,000, and that $20,000 helped us stop services projects that we were doing and focus completely on the product, and that was the turning point, right? So, and it was like no strings attached, $20,000 pretty much that we got, right? So there are always those alternate ways of funding as well. It need not be that day when you go to a VC, or at least until you figure out and you can actually think about the figure of 8,000 crore company without fear, but only with excitement, right? And it's that stage when you actually go to a VC. Until then, it's figuring out. It's finding yourself and what company you want to be building, right? And for that, there are multiple other ways to do it as well, right?
And I think of late there's been a lot of effort being made to introduce, and actually some of those have actually existed for a long period of time. They've just not been as well marketed as the venture capitalists have marketed their product. Around 15 years ago, I actually started in the venture ecosystem with a product called Venture Debt, which wasn't a very well-known product at that point of time, and we would struggle with even getting entrepreneurs to understand where is that product useful, how does the product help, when should they be using it. So, and now we've had state government, central government grants, we've had industry grants, we've had a whole bunch of corporates who are getting very, very active in this space, trying to bring in innovation, because some of them have realized this is the only way that things will go. And I think kind of going back to the first question, which is very easy for us to discuss sitting on the stage, very hard for a founder to figure out. Uh, like I've rarely come across a founder who has put his hand up and said, yes, I want to build a small company. There are, like, almost every founder you'd come across wants to build a large company in whichever space they are. And once the word large comes into the picture, automatically things like venture capital, private equity, external capital become more important. I'm hoping at some point of time we will move that metric from large to probably sustainable. But till we get there, I think people like us will be in business.
Right, right. So taking a slight turn there, right? So we talked about founder mindset, and you have been like extremely successful in finding these great founders and great brands that were built over the period of time, and you do it at whiteboard level, right? So and this I'm asking for myself as well to understand, right? So how do you do it? What do you look for in a startup, in a startup or a founder when they pitch to you at an idea level?
I wish there was a straight answer, but I'll try to give an answer. But I love the fact that you called our companies and founders great, because fundamentally proving the point that fundraising is essential. Most of them have raised money. Most of them are not yet sustainable, but they're still being counted among good founders. So I love it. So see, I think the biggest thing for us, this is the first time I think ever that I'm speaking in a public event. We've chosen to stay below the radar. Till almost a year ago, we did not have a website. So our fundamental path to doing whatever little we do is a belief in a problem that a founder is trying to solve. In some cases, it comes from the founder. In some cases, it's a problem that's already gnawing at us. So when a founder presents that, it becomes easy. We've also, in a few very select cases, tried to build businesses in-house, and in the sense, incubate an idea, identify the right kind of founders for that idea, and then kind of scour our network to find the right people, bring them on board, and request them to run those businesses for us. So I don't think there's one answer, but I think the most important two things that we spend a lot of time on, we normally do not make a commitment before we've met the founder or founding team at least 5 to 6 times. There have been many times when founders have come into us and liked the interaction, but also mentioned that we only have 2 days to take a decision. So in most cases, we've been unable to take that decision because it's hard for people to see my face 6 times in 2 days. So it's, but in general, I think that discipline has helped. The second thing that's helped and hurt both is that we've fallen in love with the problems we are trying to solve. Hurt because there have been times when I believe so strongly in a problem that I end up manifesting the solution in the first company I meet, trying to solve that problem. So we're trying to correct it as we go along, but largely I think these are the only 2 things that matter to us. Our understanding or belief in the existence of the problem. So a company of ours is solving for access to trade generic medicines to chronic patients at very, very affordable prices. Now, the moment we went deep down that rabbit hole, we realized that there are many incentive misalignments in the supply chain, which make it very hard for somebody else to do it. After we started believing in that problem as much as the founders, and we'd obviously spent enough time with the founders, it became a no-brainer for us to come in and partner with them and see where we go. That company is called Zeno Health. It used to be called Generico earlier. And at least on the fundraising stroke valuation parameter, the company's done really well. We'll see if they're successful in the long run, but for the last 6 years, they've actually done well. But I think those are the 2 most important things. We're spending enough time with the founder and spending enough time with the problem.
Got it, got it. I can so very well relate to it because in the venture world, right? So at some point of time, there's this thought around a USP for a venture fund being fast decision making that came in, right? So with the YC model coming in, and there are a bunch of other models around it, which created the whole thing around fast decision making. But I also personally deeply believe that for very long-standing relationships, you need to spend more time with the founder, not just from a selfish perspective of vetting the founder really well, even from the founder's side, right? So is this the right partner to work with? And that will actually take you a long way. And when YC does it, obviously YC throws in a lot of or condenses a lot of value in the first 6 months after they make the decision. But for a regular VC to do quick decision makings, to actually produce a lot of those things, actually end up being less valuable over a period of time, rather than working with a small number of companies, deeper vetting, spending more time, and taking a decision, right? So
I think very fair point. I think that's also the part which is which has been the most underplayed, the part that you said, wherein a founder spends time with an investor and decides who's the right investor. Because over the last 7 years that I've been doing this, we've had different times of high supply of capital and low supply of capital. In all high supply of capital markets, we've always had situations where founders have received term sheets in a matter of hours, and founders have chosen whichever term sheet they've liked without spending enough time with the investor, because the guidance has been 4 people want to come in, take the one who's giving you the best value. And in low capital markets, it's been the investors who've been giving term sheets to founders. And we have this funny word in the venture ecosystem where people issue what is called exploding term sheets, as if the piece of paper is going to be shred to pieces in 12 hours if you don't sign on it. So I think the artificial scarcity that we create on both sides makes it difficult for people to get to know each other, which is why whenever a deal becomes extremely competitive at our stage, we're normally the first ones to run away, because we just fundamentally believe that it may not give us enough time to know the founder. And kind of to take this slightly further, right? The biggest test of the right investor, the right founder combination is actually when things don't go to plan. And if I do not know how a founder will react when things are not going to plan, I am at the onset putting myself in line of fire, because in every single so-called successful company that I have seen, there have been a bare minimum of 2 to 3 bad phases that a company has had to go through before becoming successful. So if I am not sure of the founder's appetite for that bad phase, it'll be very difficult for me and the founder to work together actually when that hits, because it'll be like one of those surprises that we did not plan for. And when you're building a business, that's actually the first thing you have to prepare yourself for. A lot of my friends from business school who've seen some of our friends make a lot of money by becoming founders, wake up on a random day wanting to be founders. And my only advice, request, or view to them is that they need to establish that they have the stomach for 3 bad phases before an overnight success comes up 12 years later. So I think that's, and it's as I said, I think it's largely going back again to the fact that the investing world and the world of entrepreneurs at some level needs to come to terms with this partnership, and also come to terms with the fact that all good partnerships take time to build, to get established. Right. So if it takes 90 days for a term sheet to come through, it's not a big problem.
Right. So your point around the founders staying on and persisting, right? So I've always felt that is the hardest problem or hardest thing to actually evaluate in a founder when you have one or two or three conversations, right? So last day we had this interesting conversations with one of our LPs, and he was actually talking about that being the hardest, and he has a bunch of these micro tests that he does in the vetting process. So one of them being, he sends an email that requires a response on a Friday night, and he sees when this response comes in, right? So if it is a Saturday morning, then hey, the founder is like seriously on it. If it is a Monday morning, then okay, so that's a red flag, right? So it's just a tactical thing that we're seeing, right? And you have done this multiple times, and how do you do it? Do you have these hacks? Do you throw these tests to founders so that all the founders in the room can know?
So I I actually have a very simple thing that I try to do. We've traditionally, and I'm just trying to look for the right word, I'm not able to get it, so I'll use whatever's coming to my head. We've traditionally tried to back founders who've seen failure more than twice, whether it's in personal life, whether it's in business life, whether it's in student life. Founders who've always been outperformers in general. We've realized that at some stage things catch up to you. So I do believe very strongly that the element of timing and luck, both in entrepreneurship and in my business, is high. So for me to have a good 6-year run, I need to do the right things, but I also need to be lucky. So the same way, if I think a founder's had a very stable journey for a reasonable period of time, which tells me that they've not seen enough turmoil, the tests for me are more stringent. For founders who I think have gone through a journey of ups and downs, and from a bad phase they've come out well, and that bad phase could have occurred at any stage of their lives, but how they've come out of that bad phase, or whether or not they gave up or not, and these could be big incidents, these could be small incidents. That's the reason why we overemphasize meeting a founder more than 3, 4, 5 times, because I don't, at my stage, right, there's an Excel sheet, there's a presentation, and I think my team can put together both better than most founders. But what I'm trying to understand is that the person behind those documents, how does that person feel? Now, and we've had this other test, which I have a very conflicting opinion on. A lot of our founders and a lot of my VC friends also actually put this test in play, that if it's a problem you've faced yourself, you'll be more driven to solve it. We have a founder in our portfolio who's solving for a medical device company in the mental health space, and one of her biggest motivations for solving that problem is that somebody in her very close family has had struggles with mental health and continues to have struggles with mental health. So her resilience to try and solve it or get it right in first, second, third, fourth, fifth iteration will be high, because she's personally seen how it affects your near and dear ones. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work in every situation. For example, I don't want a company solving for loan collections to default on loans first before realizing how to go about doing it. But there are some cases where you get those examples, there's some you don't. But that's one test that I've seen some of the other friends of mine use, especially in some areas where you know that the gestation period to the solution is fairly long, because especially medtech and product companies take 4 to 5 years before you even know that the product can actually be commercialized, whether it goes through CDSCO, whether it goes through FDA, whether it gets the requisite approvals. So it's a very hard grind till that point. So I think that's another thing that we use for some hardware and robotics companies, but not a generic one.
Got it. Yeah. So I just want to call out that while we are all talking about all these things as VCs evaluating startups, it's also self-evaluation, right? Because what VCs are doing is trying to reduce the number of failures, and if it is a failure for the VC, it's a failure for the founder as well, right? So it's all self-evaluation questions as well, from the growth mindset or what does success means to you, to your resilience to the problem, your liking and your connection to the problem, and how many years are you ready to give into it. All these are actually qualifying questions for the founders first, right? So to ask if you want to go the VC route. So with that, we'll take a slight turn into the time. We spoke about spending more time with the founder and more time with the investor, or between the founder and the investor. So it's also important to optimize for time. We founders, we do not have much time, right? So one of the most important factors or important things that I've seen recently from getting to the other side of the table is the importance of the belief theses, right, in VC ecosystem. And as a founder, when I started my first company or the second company, we didn't give too much of importance to what are the thesis of belief that the VCs have or had before pitching it, right? So as founders, what do we do? So we have a list of all Indian VCs that we download somewhere from the internet. We have all the emails. We send bulk emails to all the VCs. We try to find connections to all these VCs. We talk to an analyst in the VC firm. The analyst would say, hey, yes, it's great. We are very happy. And then we get into the second conversation, third conversation. After three conversations, probably it's a no, right? But what is important is there are always these thesis points that certain VCs believe in, right? And in most of the cases, if your product falls outside of those thesis of beliefs, the chance of you getting funded is very, very less, right? So, and this is very, and surprisingly, in most of the websites of VCs, these thesis points are not extremely well documented or put out, right? So it's often very hard to actually figure out which are the, and I'm not talking about are they investing in B2B or B2C, that's too high level, right? As you go deeper and figure out in B2C, is it marketplace that they're interested in? Is it something else that they're interested in, right? So what's your thought on that? How can founders optimize their time of reaching out to VCs, and how can they find out the right ones?
Very interesting that you bring up a question regarding time when we are getting multiple reminders that we are running out of time. So I'll try to keep it as fast, as quick as possible. So I think, see, that there are two parts. I think if you've first sending those messages on those lists that you mentioned, Bhanu, let's ensure we are not on any of those lists. But I think that in itself, right, is a lazy approach to fundraising. I think when you are building a company, you know which are the companies that fall in your peer group. And that peer group does not need to be competition always. There could be complementary companies, there could be companies doing the same thing in a different sector. If you know the list of people who've backed those companies, that's your first litmus test of whether or not you're doing something right. For example, I'm building a business in restaurant SMB SaaS. Now, I know anybody who's funded SMB SaaS companies in adjacent areas has interest in the broader space. But now a guy who's building something in Web3 writes an email to me, and I happen to speak with that founder. The founder will end up giving me more education than I'll end up doing. So I take some of those calls at times only to learn. But I tell the founder, first up, there's going to be a huge waste of your time. But if you have time to waste, please waste it on me. At least I'll learn something, because that's not a space I understand. But if a founder has sent a note to me without seeing that I have no Web3 exposure ever, largely because of my lack of understanding, that's also on the founders to some extent. I think these days the world is reasonably connected through social media, through LinkedIn, through people writing stuff on Twitter, through whatever's available on websites and other networks. I think founders should do basic research on the 10 investors who they think should be their tier 1 choices, depending on what they intend to solve for. And I think when you speak with those 10 guys, like I have had this many times. There have been founders who've come into me, I've told them, I'm not interested, by the way. These are the 4 guys you should talk to, because these are the 4 guys who actually look at this space. So I think founders should use that knowledge that already exists in this tribe, rather than trying to hit an email to everybody, because most of the times that goes in a folder that nobody looks at. And I think we are out of time.
Yeah. So how much time do we have? 2:30, is it? Yeah, okay. All right, so just adding on a point, an interesting stats. Generally in the accelerator or VC space, right? So they say almost 70 or even more percentage of investments that happen through referrals or warm intros, right? And only 20% or 30% actually happen through cold outreach. On the other side, the number of incomings that come in is actually 70 to 80% cold, and only 20% are warm intros, right? So essentially, vast majority, 70 to 80% of investments actually happen from 20 to 30% of intros and intros, which also points to the importance of you optimizing your time as founders in outreach. So rather than reaching out to 100 people to end up being the 70% of cold intros to all the 70, focus on the 10 people who actually match your thesis and with high potential or propensity to invest in you, and working your network up to get warm intros is always a better strategy to, it's just stats, right? Stats prove that that's the best way to get attention and get invested, right? So do we have time for like one question or 5 minutes, or are we done? We have to. Yeah, so we'll take questions, please. Just a couple of questions.
Okay, you said when I'm trying for investments, instead of emailing a bunch of people, look at who are investing in my segment, who are invested in my peers, etc. So my question is, I'm a startup founder in sustainability, climate tech area. And let's say you have already invested in one of my competitors or one who's similar to what I do. What's the probability that you would do it twice?
In my case, 0. I won't. But what I'll be able to do, see, it also depends, like sustainability is very large. Like it's a very, very, very wide ocean, still being discovered. We still don't know some parts of that business that need to be created. But like, for example, I have a company called Step Change in my portfolio. You come in and tell me, Anshu, I'm building something which is similar to Step Change, for example. My 2 bits of advice to you, either an email or call, would be: A, please don't tell me anything about what you're building out. B, please go to these 5 people who look at this space and try to reach out to them if they are interested in the space, because whatever you share with me is not safe. So you should not share anything about your business with me. Do not trust me because I say so. But go to these 5 people who were interested in the space, who've done some work in the space and did not invest in Step Change, for example.
Thank you for the points A and B.
I just want to call out that not everyone will be as honest as Anshu, so be careful about that also. And again, just calling out the high level area that they invest, be it sustainability, is very different from very specific business model or very specific problem that a particular company is solving, right? So definitely the high level area of interest should match, but very specifically a business model that a company a company is already working on might not always go well with each other, right? One more question.
One follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
VCs are also taking a risk with investments, because you are expecting that one of your investments would turn out to be a unicorn one day, hopefully. So why not bet on 2? One of them might well succeed. I mean, you believe in the segment, you believe in the area, you trusted one company enough. Why don't you double your chances with 2 of them? 2 similar.
So I'll answer it at least from a whiteboard stage. I don't trust a company, I trust a founder. So think of it this way, that if I've already trusted one guy to do something, now I go with another guy, either I'm telling this guy I don't trust you enough, or this guy will at least start feeling that what the hell's happening. Because if there's a convergence of those businesses very, very early, so if it's 5 years down the line, nobody cares. But if that convergence is visible on day one, and I actually start, because we invest time with the founders. And as I said, I don't invest in companies, I invest in people. If that person starts distrusting me, or vice versa, it just goes downhill from there on. So I would rather not take that chance. I would rather be careful when making my first choice. But it's like, I don't want to go there, but there are merits to marrying more than once. But we don't. We live with the one we've chosen for the first time, or at least we try. So I think when I've made a choice, right or wrong, I'll live with it.
As founders, when we're looking for people to invest into a company, probably for the venture capitalists, they have a couple of options. But I want to know whether the founders also have that many options, because if they have, led the company forward by themselves, their investment, and the small group of people, but they also want to collaborate and keep the core of their company alive. I don't know, like, should founders feel that they have that choice to make when it comes to who we want to choose? And
Founders always do. It's about exercising that right. So I think, see, businesses are large, actually not largely, businesses are always built by founders. People like us are sitting on the sidelines hoping that we get a bit of the pie. So I think the truth is, founders always have the option. I just think that if founders are careful about the capital choices they make, because for a lot of founders, capital is something that they've not done too much work on, or they've not spent a lot of time figuring out what are the options. As it was even mentioned earlier, right? There are many ways to raise money. Venture capital is one among probably 8 tools or 9 tools that a founder has to capitalize the business. Venture capital seems like the most glamorous because the newspapers make it so, and also people like us sell it well. But fundamentally, that's one among 9 options you have. So founders always have the right and power. I think what founders do need, though, I must confess, is some sane advice on how to go about it, because you do not expect all founders to be fully well versed with those options. But I think if you get the right bunch of advisors or people helping you think through that, founders normally always have all the choices, especially in the early stages of building a business. And if you set the right foundation, a lot of the things get solved for you.
I just want to add, it's all about leverage, right? So it's all about leverage as you have as a founder, right? So interesting story. So I was talking to one of the analysts in a large VC fund, to the top 3, top 5 VC fund in India. And one of the activities that she does regularly was actually following the top tier leadership layer of companies, the large companies like Flipkart and Freshworks and these companies, and see if they are about to quit, right? So, because they wanted to capture them, if they're quitting and starting another company, they wanted to be the first ones to capture them, right? So, understand that even VCs want to find the best startups, and they are actually putting in a lot of money and energy and effort to actually do that, right? So, when you have your leverage up, be it by being a senior executive in one of the fastest growing companies out there, be it by this being the 3rd company that you're building, the first 2 were successful, or be it by an amazing traction that you've built early stage in your company, right? And I've seen venture capitalists actually reaching out to startups to fund after an amazing product hunt launch, right? It can be as simple as a product hunt launch, or it can be like great Twitter traction that you build. It can be an amazing GTM motion that you put into place so that people are talking about you, right? So it's all about, it's a game of building that leverage, right? So the moment you have that leverage really high up, you have so much of inbound, you have so many conversations, so that you are at ease and you can actually say no to a few people and choose whom you want to, right? And early stage fundraise, there is a pre-step to early stage fundraise, not the ones that not the one that involves downloading a list of companies and doing that, not just that. A better one, obviously the harder one, but a better one is to build your leverage through some means. If you don't have a leverage as a founder, as being your 3rd company or whatever, you try to build it through traction, right? And there are always those ways, right? So the better leverage you have, always the better for fundraising, right? So, all right, so I guess it's time. Thanks a lot, and thanks for the time.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and practical strategies for early stage fundraising. So I kindly request Mr. Santosh Jose, venture partner at Conglo Ventures, to give away a small token of appreciation and gratitude to the panelists. We have to Mr. Jofin. And this is for Mr. Anshu.